Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to Yu-Gi-Oh! And video game news. Today is Wednesday, July 12th. I'm experimenting with having the date show up at the beginning of the stream, and it seems like the problem here would be the date would just stay up. Now, until I switch back like that. So that's not going to really work. Uh, um, I'll have to figure out some other way to program that. Um, I was thinking of using Google Slides to have the date built in, but Google Slides actually does not have a function to bring up the current date. So it would just have to be updated over and over again, which on one level, I guess if the idea is that slides are supposed to be static in the information they present, that makes some sense. But it also just highlights how I still kind of feel like Google Slides and uh, Slide PowerPoint, which does allow you to actually show the date, um, still, I think both softwares are pretty useless when it comes down to really trying to accomplish anything. We only have a maintenance notice here as far as an update. So, yeah. All of a sudden, Yu-Gi-Oh! Has stopped doing as many notifications in the past couple days, which I'm kind of happy for that. Like, it was getting fairly ridiculous, the amount of notifications, and none of them felt like they were that important. Now, notably, what you run into here is that you log in and you just are getting a screen like this. Whereas the World Championship Finals should have a giant still image that says like World Championship Finals rules, click here to read more type intro, and then new selection pack should have a giant special thumbnail art to advertise a new selection pack, even if it was not unique to that specific selection pack. If they just had a giant image pop up, something that was different and got your attention, like this is much closer to what it should be. But even this really should probably just be a full screen with the maintenance notice button there. So they're even doing it. They're just presenting it kind of in a weird way. And perhaps they're not presenting. They don't have enough art there for all the different notifications that show up. Even though they do kind of have thumbnails, a lot of this is very generic stuff too. But my thought potentially is Konami is, after a year, kind of cooling down on this game, and it's slowing down into a kind of a slower pace, which is kind of fine. I mean, after a year, it's doing better than the 6 months that I feel like Marvel Snap has been out, where Marvel Snap has really ruined their experience with their latest update, and yet not really improved their initial experience, which was pretty bad to start with. They've really gone in the wrong direction, in my opinion. So yeah, we have like 12 more hours, and then the Synchronized Cosmos goes away and probably will be replaced with something else in that exact same amount of time. So that just leaves me playing ranked. Over the past 2 days, I've been playing Luigi's Mansion 3, and I've completely finished it, with the exception that they do really a pathetic attempt to add multiplayer in Luigi's Mansion 3, and you basically need to play multiplayer in one of the two aspects. The Scraper, I believe it is. One's called like the Scare Park, one's called the Scare Scraper, I think. The Scare Park is just a collection of 3 mini games that are multiplayer, almost like a Mario Party mini games that really shouldn't be in the game. And then if you buy one DLC, you get like 3 more mini games, and another DLC, you get another 3 mini games. So, like, even if the game came with 9 mini games for multiplayer, 1 to 4 players, it still wouldn't be that much. And again, it just doesn't make a lot of sense. They don't even really do a good job telling you that you can play Luigi's Mansion 3 in 2-player co-op. In fact, they don't really do a good job of tutorializing or putting any frequently asked questions. It's all hidden under menus, stuff that you would just never see unless you went looking for it. Then the problem with the Scare Scraper is that it is a randomly generated, like, I guess you would call it a roguelite game, where you have 5, 10, 15, or 20 floors you can pick from, and then you're given a random challenge on the floors. I only played it for a brief time, but I really just started off with finding ghosts and capturing ghosts. And in those floors, there are some rare ghosts that you might very well capture. And then if you capture the rare ghost once, then that is marked in your collection in the gallery of your story mode and your save file, which is odd that there isn't just a completely separate profile and save file for the rare ghost, because it really makes you feel like, after spending not a ton of time, 10-20 hours playing the main story of the game, it makes you feel like you've just missed something incredibly well hidden, when it really isn't the case. There are no rare ghosts in the main story. Plus, you can't really play the Scare Scraper multiplayer by yourself, because there are specific traps that you can get trapped in, and somebody else has to come and save you. And if your life gets down to 0, somebody has to come and revive you. And then that just creates another irritating point, in that there are elements and traps and items and things in the Scare Scraper multiplayer content that is just not in the story mode. And the story mode could have used a lot more as far as the Luigi's Mansion 3. I would estimate, considering the fact that you can get a S ranking in Luigi's Mansion 1 for collecting $100,000, and then you only need to collect about $80,000 in Luigi's Mansion 3 to get an A ranking, and they've just gotten rid of the S ranking. You can take from those numbers that Luigi's Mansion 3 is probably about 20% smaller in actual gameplay time than the original Luigi's Mansion 1. I will say, I think Luigi's Mansion 1 really was just a mansion, whereas every floor of the 15 floors in Luigi's Mansion 3 is a completely different level. It's very varied that way. I think it would have made some sense, certainly, to perhaps had more hotel room floors in between it. You could easily have doubled the number of floors to 30 by having just a few rooms that were more thematically designed but still looked like hotel rooms. Like, for instance, the level that is the giant pyramid and is Egyptian pharaoh themed. You get on that floor, you go down the hallway, you open the door, and you're at the pyramid. After that point, there's basically one small room, one larger center room, 2 small rooms, and one more smaller room. So we're talking 4 or 5 small rooms and one larger center room, and that's pretty much it. And all the rooms are part of the pyramid and don't look like hotel rooms. They don't have beds, they don't have cabinets, they just don't really make sense that they would exist in a hotel. So yes, you would get potentially a lot of repetitiveness and redundancy, but it really wouldn't hurt to have at least 3 or 4 rooms that look like hotel rooms on a floor below or on the same floor to add some more stuff. Honestly, even if Luigi's Mansion was the same length or longer than Luigi's Mansion 1, they obviously got the balance wrong. They could have easily increased the amount of dollars you got, the amount of gold, by 20%. Just with every drop. Easy way to say, hey, let's drop one more dollar bill, let's drop one more gold coin, one more gold bar. It definitely would have been better throughout the game if you could interact with more things, but it would also have been nice if the interaction with things were more linear in their thought, or incremental in the thought as far as you progressed. You get to that final Boo fight and you've never fought anybody quite like Boo, and you have to just learn his patterns through 3 stages as far as defeating King Boo at the end of the game. And yeah, it doesn't really make sense that there isn't more progress with that. Every single boss you fight on each floor is far too similar, far too different from the boss previously, and the generic ghosts you're fighting outside of the boss fights don't educate the player towards a direction as to how you will defeat the boss. There's a breakdancing boss, for instance, at one point. You have to do this whole dancing pattern, and nothing has really set you up for that. Whereas it would have made a lot of sense to see one of those breakdancing characters show up even randomly on the floor and just learned how to defeat those characters at that point. Maybe that would have spoiled some surprise, certainly, but better that than what often felt like was the case, where I was having to just try and figure out or look up online the solution to the patterns. There isn't a lot of upgrades throughout the game either. The one major upgrade you get near the end of the game is like a super sucker for your vacuum cleaner function that really only lets you use it 3 times throughout the entire game, because you have to be plugged into a wall outlet to use the super sucker function, and there's only 3 wall outlets. It's a fun thing, certainly, but it really is just a let's mess up this area idea as you're ripping the walls down with the super vacuum function at very specific spots. In a lot of ways it would have made a lot more sense to get a plug or a big battery or just a boost in electricity after you had captured every boss ghost on the 15th floor and of each of the 15 floors. And then at that point, the Super Sucker would be kind of your slight reward in that you destroy the area where the boss fight happens, and perhaps you destroy it all the way to the point where it goes back to being a hotel floor, and you're destroying the delusion or the fiction that the ghost had made to make it look like a pyramid, on the pyramid level, for instance. At the end credits, they show that King Boo was using a crystal on his crown to control the generic ghosts, and the generic ghosts are actually friendly otherwise. And Luigi doesn't really get to keep the mansion so much, as instead Professor Egad, your tutorial character, kind of keeps the mansion, and Luigi just leaves on the same bus he came in on. And he basically was asleep at the start of the game in the first cutscene, and he falls asleep at the end, so the whole thing potentially could have been a dream, although they don't really lean into that idea. There are also gimmicks like being able to teleport through TVs that you would think once that's introduced on one floor, every now and then you would have seen a television that would have taken you to another floor, or taken you to another area on the same floor, and they really don't. It's also an annoying point where you can look it through cracks in the walls in a few places, and one of them shows you like the exterior, the inside of a the inside of an elevator shaft, and it seems to me like the point of that would have been there would have been some kind of collectible or way to get inside the elevator shaft, and you never do. I spent at least 20 minutes looking around going, shouldn't there be something here? But no, it isn't. It isn't the case. So yeah, I won't say Luigi's Mansion 3 is bad. I will say it's weird that I really don't have a way to play Luigi's Mansion 2. And I'm not sure if New Moon really is Luigi's Mansion 2 or not. Man, nothing is working. Oh well. Kinda doesn't matter. Does that mean this won't work? But it all does come off with some fairly large amount of weirdness in that Nintendo games are increasingly expensive just because of interest rate increases, but they are getting incredibly short compared to just your average PC game I play. I expect now that I'll get back to playing or start playing Shadow of the Tomb Raider, and I imagine that game is going to grind on and go for 60 plus hours of gameplay, whereas I just burned through Luigi's Mansion 3. And yeah, Metroid Dread took maybe a couple days more for me to beat, but it wasn't that long. The extra content in Luigi's Mansion as far as collecting the boos and playing hide and go seek is not really enough to justify going back there. And it definitely feels like at some point I decided to just start running instead of fighting the randomly spawned ghosts. And after that point I stopped running into encounters, it felt like. So, I don't know. collecting all the gems didn't seem like it really did anything. So, and then there was popping up these little mini achievements for doing certain things, but I could never find a list that showed me what other things needed to happen. And yeah, looking in the credits, it's yet another second party or third party company developing a game that Nintendo obviously doesn't care that much about. Although, it really just does come off nowadays like Nintendo barely makes any games internally at all. And the main striking thing I got from Luigi's Mansion 3 is the fact that it is just a Ghostbusters game. So not a terrible thought, really. But perhaps since you were in a hotel for Luigi's Mansion 3, perhaps you should just have him enter into a more open world Ghostbuster type game. And leave the idea of having to be in between four walls. Like, what you could also do, certainly, is you could have him going through paintings, since King Boo is trapping people through paintings. It wouldn't be crazy to, in a Luigi's Mansion 4, have a very small hub mansion area where you're going through paintings otherwise, and those paintings are taking you to magical open world areas and doing a real Ghostbusters style adventure. I don't know if they really need to keep the game as simplistic just to be kid friendly as Luigi's Mansion 3 was. Seems like you could potentially maybe have some more characters talking, even if it's not Luigi and Mario. Mario does show up at the end and completely just style, I don't know if I'm using that phrase right, style on Luigi, and does all kinds of Mario 64 wall kicks, triple jumps type things, leaving poor Luigi in the dust, just being unable to follow Mario. Which, if anything, it really just makes Luigi look like he's poorly treated by his brother. Otherwise, I don't think I have anything else to say about Luigi's Mansion 3. I'll try and take a break before I play like Skyward Sword or Pikmin 3 and try to make sure I get at least one game. The other thing, certainly I've been doing a little bit of, but not much, is Amazon Prime Day. And yeah, Prime Day sales seem like they're pretty much the same. Perhaps we're getting slightly better sales, or perhaps I'm just doing a much better day of not dealing with it. What I did is I just looked through my saved later list, which is pretty long, and then picked out things that I'd saved over the course of the past year or previous years that were actually on sale, and then I considered from there. There's a few lightning deals, maybe one lightning deal that was actually worth it, which was attempt number 2 at my LED controllable Christmas lights. This time buying Govee, getting out of the Tuya Smart Life infrastructure in favor of hopefully getting a higher quality product by going with a brand name like Govee. And this was a pretty good lightning deal for what it was, about half off. I also took everything in the cart that I was considering, and I ran it through Camel just to make sure it really was a deal. So I'm trying to be as good and accurate as possible on that stuff too. And I did end up spending more money than I'm sure I would have liked, which would have been 0, but what I actually found was actually some Tuya Smart Life ceiling fans. So replacing one ceiling fan and seeing if the software on that is good enough. It comes with a remote, even if the whole smart part of it doesn't work. The bigger concern certainly would be that its wiring is terrible and it just breaks really fast, because when you're talking hardware in a house like a ceiling fan, while that is fairly easy to replace, it is not something you want to replace after even 5 or 10 years. You kind of would like them to go up and stay up. That being said, one of my ceiling fans is old enough and dusty enough that the motor is just showing its age. And I have another ceiling fan where the light socket is shorted out, so that's a problem too. I think what happened particularly in my house is that the previous owner used a bunch of old equipment that he got for free from working as like a manager in a remodeling company or handyman company. So I think he got 5-10-year-old ceiling fans that he then also installed, and so we're talking potentially 10-20 ceiling fans, 20-year-old ceiling fans. But yeah, ceiling fans are going to be expensive whether you buy brand names or not, and I don't know if buying a American brand name is any real better. It's really any better than buying a off-brand name Chinese product. Well, we shall see. I also got the Fire TV Cube for about $100, which is only slightly more than a Roku, for a 4K streaming device that potentially has some other features that have caught my eye. I do see some potential there. I'll give it a try, although I am fairly open to returning the Fire TV Cube if it can't do the basic things well, or just has a terrible operating system as far as that Fire TV OS goes. And then some smaller things, and then there was one other big ticket item. Only but I can't really remember what it was even. And that probably says something, certainly, in that now, less than 12 hours later, I don't remember exactly what I got. So it's so easy to get caught up in the sales. Let's see if I can look it up and see if it's worth mentioning. Ceiling fan, Christmas lights, magnetic knife blocks, USB cord, extension power plug, and a powered mopper Swiffer thing, which inherently the powered mopper Swiffer thing is the thing that was only like $20, but it's really an experiment in trying to avoid spending $600 for an electric robot mopper, or an electric steam handheld manual steam or vacuum cleaner type thing. But yeah, really the robot mopper is the direction it should go, but going from $20 to like $600 for that, for a Norwell robot mopping vacuum cleaner, is a steep jump to go. Like, ideally, I wish there was somebody that made a robot or refurbished robot vacuum cleaners that would just put a controller, even if it was just a wired controller, as far to it, and you could just follow along behind it and control it with like a video game controller type device. Let's see how this goes. But yeah, if you could get the price down considerably because of that, by just having a remote control behind it, I'd be very happy. I still need to buy the server rack, and that's just never going on sale, so there's no reason to really buy it now. But yeah, the main expense there from what I purchased, I guess, is the ceiling fan and the Christmas lights, both of which are just replacement repair things, so very practical but poorly timed purchases. Another thing with the Prime Day sales too is that I've seen a lot more people posting slick deals posts around Prime Day this year, and that makes me feel like the sales are a little bit better, but they still are very much in categories that I am just not. I'm just not, like, interested in. Yeah, I'm looking at my screen and losing my thing. I did see some, like, puzzles And the sales were, I think, a little bit better, but a little bit weirder too, in that things often were lightning deals with a coupon, things like that. And I guess we're bearing the lead as far as news, because I haven't even gotten to the news yet, but the big story today certainly is, and we'll talk about it. Microsoft has gotten the go-ahead to proceed with the acquisition of Activision Blizzard, in the sense that the FTC is not did not win their preliminary injunction filing, which is not super surprising. I probably should write down when I make an opinion or make a prediction, so I'm not just blowing smoke up my own butt as far as whether or not I was right or not, but I'm fairly certain I did say that there would be real damages if this FTC did get its preliminary injunction approved, in the sense that Microsoft would have to renegotiate the contract and pay a breakup fee, whereas the FTC really hadn't put out enough filings to show why there would be more damage if the merger was allowed to continue. And then I kind of heard after that the CMA, the UK people, agreed to negotiate, but then I've seen a new post saying that they're now threatening to do something else. So seems like the CMA maybe got a little bit spooked by the FTC not getting its preliminary injunction, but then is either acting strong and bold now, or maybe I heard a rumor that wasn't true. Now, the FTC in the United States still can proceed with the lawsuit, and I assume will, but the lawsuit is just going to happen, and then if the FTC could prove its case using US law, it would try to undo the process of the merger and undo the merger, which would be burdensome, and people say it would be almost impossible to undo a merger, but it's really not that burdensome as you would think. You could easily have the judge say all filings, all paperwork, all hirings, and all terminations must be documented, and if this case goes fully against the Activision Blizzard merger or acquisition by Microsoft, then we're going to undo any legal filings and nullivate them, and we're going to nullivate any hirings and any firings, which that is something I guess you technically can't undo that much of. If you fire somebody and then 6 months later or a year later people say actually you're hired back, I doubt the people would actually come back. But yeah, you could undo the paperwork and the legal stuff, particularly if the judge forces them to keep a very good record of what happens during the process of the merger. Here we have Video Games Chronicle And I imagine we might stop playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Fairly early today because there's just not a lot happening. It is just ranked play. Microsoft Activision deal could face a new merger investigation in the UK. UK regulator, the CMA, has said it's ready to consider a restructured deal. Yeah, I thought restructured deal in this case meant that they were willing to work with them. Yeah, the CMA announced on Tuesday that they would pause legal proceedings with a view to reaching out to the court agreement on the game company's proposed merger after the deal was cleared in the FTC. The watchdog said it was ready to consider any proposals from Microsoft to restructure the transaction in a way that would address concerns that led to the blocking of the deal initially. Now remember, the concerns with the blocking of the deal initially were for the CMA online gaming. So Game Pass. And in a lot of ways, this is exactly the same thing that the CMA said originally, is that we're willing to consider any offers Microsoft is willing to effectively bribe us with. And Microsoft said basically nothing, or didn't bribe them with very much. And that's where the CMA merger seemed to come from. Now, Microsoft perhaps could throw out an offer to them, certainly saying we won't make Call of Duty a Xbox Game Pass exclusive, in the same way that they've already said we won't make Call of Duty an Xbox exclusive. But I don't know what else they can really say as far as the online aspect. They can't hurt Game Pass in any way, really, because Game Pass needs, if it's going to succeed, to be better, far better than it is even now. So if anything, it does just seem like the CMA is a organization you kind of have to play hardball with. In a follow-up statement provided by Bloomberg, the regulator said the restructured deal proposal could require a fresh investigation, which, I mean, isn't that just by default? Like, if Microsoft did offer a new proposal, then you would have to investigate that new proposal. But this also does feel very much like the UK politics and local politics in general, or even in this case, a more, I guess you wouldn't use the word federal, but maybe that's the right term, politics. But in the UK, it does seem like there's just a whole lot of little fiefdoms that run parts of the government, and a whole lot of red tape that they love to do. So yeah, you really just have to fall back to the idea of you really just have to fall back to the idea of the Activision Blizzard merger is highly likely to go through. And nothing any government can do seems to be powerful enough, or there just doesn't seem to be enough political will to actually fight Microsoft. I actually heard that Bill Gates, formerly of Microsoft and still a member of the board and owning a lot of shares of Microsoft, put out a thing about AI, and I was like, why is the Today Show, I think it was, talking about Bill Gates. And if you're going to say anything about Bill Gates, why are you not talking about the fact that he was a frequent flyer, I believe, of the Jeffrey Epstein planes, and almost certainly was sleeping with young, if not underage girls, and that's why Melinda Gates divorced him or broke up with him. I mean, that is the only story to really be talking about him. And if anything, I feel like we need to do some small character assassination on a lot of these fancy names like Bill Gates and Steve Jobs, because these rich people obviously had publishing arms and agents that were trying their best to make these rich people look good instead of like the standard scumbags most rich people are. And we need to start, I think, retroactively going through that and going, hey, you know what, Bill Gates wasn't really probably that smart and wasn't really that as influential to Microsoft as he sold himself as. Steve Jobs was really the face of a company and made a lot of dumb decisions when running Apple, at least the first time he was running Apple. We need to at least balance it out to say, hey, these are humans and not Herculean demigods that they try to pass themselves off as. Yeah, I think that's good enough as far as playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Either I've gotten better at playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Or they just haven't really given me a lot of challenge lately. Perhaps trying to make up for having 2 or 3 events in 1 month. There's still definitely an issue where I'm gonna need to move up to at least diamond or platinum, whatever the next one is, and I would ideally like to move up even higher. Yeah, I'd like to get all the way to diamond from platinum, but at the very least I want to get to platinum. Although if I get to platinum 5, maybe then I don't bother if there isn't enough time to try to get to diamond 5, because it doesn't matter. Although they have introduced now a new master level, so they're just increasingly adding higher and higher tiers, which for a game called Master Duel, it does kind of make sense to have a master level. I don't know if it really makes sense to have a lion as your logo for that. Honestly, these animals as your levels don't really make any sense anyways. It really has nothing to do with Yu-Gi-Oh! If anything, each level should have a character. Right, let's just see. Edit icon. Let's see, you would think like rookie level would be maybe a Karibo or something, and then Dark Magician might be diamond level, Blue Eyes White Dragon might be gold level. Then, do I not have a Yami Yu-Gi-Oh! Character? Yeah, looking at these icons, there's actually a considerably large amount of characters that are missing here as far as the anime characters. Yeah. But yeah, it would make a lot of sense to have like Joey as the rookie character, and then all of Yugi's from the original Yu-Gi-Oh! Series working their way up, with Yami Yugi being master level. Something like that. So this new comic book indie group has a booth at Comic-Con Distillery, which I don't feel like is the best name, particularly in the weird spelling. Feels like it could have been D-Story without the L. It kind of feels like it is yet another attempt to get away from maybe DC and yet have a D logo. They've announced, I think, their first comic called The Devil's Cut, although that may also be a collection of like pilot comics to try and figure out what they would continue to fund. Creators own their work and a piece of Distillery itself, so it's a creator-owned co-op basically. Premium oversized limited edition single issues, premium limited edition merch, physical and digital. Digital done different. When you buy, you own, you can sell. Creators can cut every time. No NFT hustle or crypto hassle. So apparently, selling a digital copy of your comic books gets you some money back, but then there's some percentage going to creators, and then like the person buying the comic is, I assume, getting it cheaper buying a quote-unquote used digital copy of a comic. That doesn't make a lot of sense. The names certainly are going to mean a lot. There's also, I think, another company that started almost like 6 months to a year ago trying to do a very similar thing, and I think that one may have failed pretty terribly because of the person in charge of it not having like a creator's own thing. So this may be a case where people have left DC because a new person's in charge of DC, James Cameron, I believe, and they went to one company and it didn't work out, and now they're moving to another company. But there are some big names here I recognize, like Brian Azzarello, and then James Tynion the Fourth, Scott Snyder, I recognize too. The rest of these names, not so much, and I assume Jock is a pen name. Seems like there's one editor alone, so can one editor really run the creator's works of 3 or 4 comics? Probably should be able to. Well, obviously they don't have a lot going on quite at the moment. Let's see. Here we have Brad Smith's statement, the vice chair and president of Microsoft. We're grateful to the Court of San Francisco for this quick and thorough decision, and hope our other jurisdictions will continue working towards a timely resolution. We have demonstrated consistently through this process we are committed to working creatively and collaboratively to address regulatory concerns. This is his default response, almost certainly written up to say very little in a brief amount. Well, I'm sure they had a completely different comment that they would have put had it gone the other way. Whereas you look at like Phil Spencer's response here, which I don't know why blue checkmark people aren't taking advantage of the fact that they can do more than 140 characters. I can only assume that maybe there is some app that still works and they're using that app, or there's some apps that still work on Twitter that require the minimum 140 characters. It almost certainly might be a case that Phil Spencer is actually just text messaging, and text messages only allow 140 characters still, although I don't know what messenger app on phones would not move to more characters. But you get like this 1, 2, and 3 sentences of tweets, and you can see he goes much more in detail as far as what he's talking about. And then it just ends with end. The veteran BioWare writer Jay Wadamaniuk, I don't know how you would really pronounce that, has left BioWare, which he was there for over 20 years and had a hand in several developers' games. I almost certainly would assume he worked on Mass Effect. He started as a community manager for BioWare, then transitioning to an associate writer in 2010's Mass Effect 2. So he worked on Mass Effect 3, which people didn't really like. The ending, at least, of Mass Effect 3. And he worked on the pre-production of Mass Effect Andromeda, so he really doesn't have the most illustrious career. And that is certainly the danger of working at a company like BioWare, where they have a good decade, probably now, of not having the best reception around their Mass Effect games, and I don't know what else they've even made in that time. And so if you work there for 21 years and 10 years has mostly been silence or at least no major hit, that's a problem. Yeah. Inherently, if you're young and ambitious in the video game world, you have to work for a company for 4 to 6 years and hope that game comes out and is a smash hit. And if that game doesn't come out that you worked on and it isn't a smash hit, you have to hope the next one is. And if you've potentially worked 12 years at a place and had 2 flops in a row, well, now your resume shows something a lot worse. Although I don't know if that would really stop you from getting a new job somewhere else. The question, I guess, will really come down to whether or not he announces he's retiring, which he's not really doing at this point, or whether he's got a different job lined up. In January, also another writer, Mac Walters, who worked on Mass Effect and Anthem, announced they would leave too. So, oh yeah, they worked on Anthem too. So it's been 3 flops in a row. And it's probably a little easier for writers to leave than anybody else. Programmers. Well, we have a... let's reload this page. Gearbox official tweet. Here. Retweeting. Have a Nice Death official launch trailer, March 22nd. Is still their pinned tweet. But then they put out this, have you ever wanted to play games before? And give feedback. Here's here. Click on the link below and fill out the survey to join their global community. You can receive cool rewards for playtesting games, either in person or online, and providing feedback. So they're looking for game testers. Gearbox, I assume, still basically running everything out of Frisco, Texas, so there's not a high chance of unionization as far as their game testers go. So anything you got here would be either not paying at all or very low paying. It does perhaps imply that Gearbox is working on a new game, which they obviously should be working on a new game. Inherently, game testers in general need some kind of work pool style union, job pool, work pool, training pool idea, where you could get high school kids who want to play games and be game testers who are also on perhaps a degree plan, so maybe even college kids at minimal age, where they could be given school credit for play testing. I kind of hate the internship system, but an intern system that also pays wouldn't be a terrible thought as far as where play testers should go. But there should be kind of a training pool and job pool there, where when a play tester is no longer needed from a company like Gearbox, they can't just be fired. They should be sent back to a job pool, and then the job pool should train them, and they should be hired for the next company that needs play testers. And that's all stuff that's highly unlikely to happen in Frisco, Texas. And yeah. Meanwhile, it seems to me like they are definitely trying to just have nearly open betas and get rid of having the idea of actually paying anybody, instead giving cool rewards instead. Notice that they are pointing out cool rewards, not paying or anything that would look like a job on a resume. It's important to point out that being a game tester pretty much does nothing for a career if you want to actually work in the video game industry. You really need to skip completely over from game testing and never work in it at all, because it actually, I imagine, hurts your resume, and instead have a bachelor's degree to master's degree in computer programming or animation or writing or audio editing, whatever your subgenre would be that you would want to work in a video game capacity. And frankly, working in any of those capacities is probably going to pay less than just working similar jobs. A programmer outside of the game industry will get paid a lot better than a programmer inside of it. Here we have a Overwatch cosplay for a character, I guess, named Ashi. I'm not familiar enough with Overwatch to know how accurate this is, but yeah, you've got a decent outfit, although somewhat not a lot of effort in here. Off-the-shelf boots, off-the-shelf leather pants, off-the-shelf shirt. It does look like the jacket and maybe the tie have been made custom. And just being unfamiliar with the character, I don't know if this is the right background or if this is the right makeup or anything like that, but I guess that is kind of the problem too, as far as cosplay, is that I really need to be much more informed on what the characters look like before I can make better commentary. GameDeveloper.com had reached out to comment from the ESA as far as the report from the National Video Game Historical Foundation, saying somewhere around 82.7% of all games before 1990 are at risk of being lost because they're just not being preserved. And so I guess this is the comment response coming back from GameDeveloper.com, which they are also very desperate to get people to comment and make submissions to their as far as submitted articles and things like that. So they obviously want more pages and more articles and don't have enough writers to do it. and don't want to pay writers to do it. So the ESA has just bounced it back and expecting publishers to fix the preservation problem, which the ESA is the publishers. If we're going to say corporations are people and make that stupid argument, then we have to say lobbyist groups that are only semi-independent from video game publishers who are funding it. It's just ridiculous to say the ESA isn't video game publishers. At the very least, you could say the board members, Nintendo being one of them, of the ESA, I believe Microsoft and Sony also being one of them, are definitely publishers. The subheadline here is the ESA says it's committed to defending current copyright practices, which makes game preservation all the more difficult. Which, yeah, that's no surprise there either, that the ESA would push for the copyrights to stay this way, if not become more stringent, if they could get away with it. Is there really anything here that they said otherwise? Yeah, ESA is a trade group backed by major publishers like Nintendo, Microsoft, and Sony. And they certainly are just going to double down on it. Now, I guess the good news here is that ESA is pretty much on the way out, because most of their funding was coming from people buying booths at E3, and E3 is obviously dead. So now the ESA is going to only really be able to make money through ESRB rating systems, and nothing is really stopping. Walmart is about the only thing stopping, I guess, video game companies from just saying, we'll do our own ratings. And inherently, with almost every game having an online aspect and online content never being rated, because it's almost impossible to know whether somebody would jump onto the chat and say something awful. Almost every game, if you're engaging with the online stuff, can't be appropriately rated anyways. Most ESRB ratings are very generic and often not that helpful. It's hard to boil down a 60-hour experience down to, is it T for teen or 10 plus or M for mature, and that's why almost all video games get M for mature anyways. Whereas 2-hour movies being rated a certain level kind of makes sense. And even the TV shows, they know what time slot and what rules they're going to stick to. So they figure out what they're going for, usually. I'd like to see a direct response here from the ESA, but I don't know if there was a much here. They just released an essential facts survey for 2023, and the ESA president, CEO Stanley Pierre Lewis, which I haven't actually heard his name before, described video games as the most expressive works in the copyright canon, and that it is critically important that companies maintain authority to best decide how video games are released. There is a lot of ground, certainly, for the CEO of the ESA to be ousted, if he could be ousted. I don't know if he can, because he definitely has dropped the ball as far as making E3. Poop should roll uphill as far as the failure of E3. But at a certain level, I feel like Nintendo in particular, if not secretly Microsoft and probably Sony too, just love the copyright laws as they are. what scares the likes of Nintendo and publishers is that if the copyright laws made more exemptions for historical preservation, they think that all of a sudden you would have like 1 billion people claiming to historically preserve video games and really just downloading a bunch of ROMs for their own personal enjoyment. The truth, I believe, is you already have 1 million people who have downloaded ROMs for their own personal enjoyment. And so you would not really have an increase there at all. People openly now will sell and buy ROM-filled devices on Amazon and places like that, whereas that would have been done more secretly. People openly talk about RetroPlies and retro flags, which obviously you're going to get ROMs that way to use that. So they've already really lost that battle. And Microsoft really gets a bit more of an exception there, because it's not like Microsoft has that old of games anyways. So like they don't have decades of history. They either have backward compatible from the original Xbox games, or they don't care about the original Xbox games enough if people are actually trying to emulate them. And the vast majority of original Xbox games that aren't backward compatible or remastered or remade are not worth playing, I'm sure. So that is something I guess Microsoft could differentiate itself, certainly, as they could be the platform for emulation, more emulation, if on their consoles, since they don't really have that history. Anyways, let's move on. Let's see. The ESA also said, probably just as they were putting out information and perhaps trying to shift the narrative to something else, that 1/3 of American adults are over 65 are playing video games, which I believe true. I do not believe any majority of them are playing video games with controllers hooked up to consoles or TVs. I don't think they're playing Xboxes or PlayStations or Switches. I think they're playing free cell, solitaire, things like that on their cell phones, or really simplistic Facebook games, perhaps. I think there's almost certainly a much bigger divide there as far as what they would call a game. I doubt very many 65 or older people are 360 no-scoping people in Call of Duty, or playing high action games, or playing niche Bayonetta or Binding of Isaac type games, or anything like that. And then Microsoft seems to either really know that they can get away with anything, or just be really bad about this, in that they have laid off nearly 300 more people in a new round of job cuts. This is separate from the 10,000 jobs that were cut earlier this year. In comparison, 300 seems like a drop in the bucket compared to 10,000. And yeah, I think Microsoft probably has overhired people in general, and overhired people in general outside of the Xbox division. Windows 12 they're starting to talk about now, and seems like they're once again just trying to move people away from Windows 11 because people didn't like Windows 11, but they're still trying to change things visually, when I really would prefer just a much more optimized, simplistic visual interface for Windows. Speaking of being unoptimized, de novo is apparently going to try and make a survey and a sampling of, I believe, just one game to prove that de novo doesn't slow down video games, even though there's been a lot of really good observational data and claims made by other YouTubers that de novo definitely does slow down games. But yeah, de novo only survives if they can convince people to at least believe it's not a bad thing. This is the shopping affiliate. Thing we don't really need to talk about it. Yeah. I feel like the shopping affiliate page here probably hasn't been updated. This is the problem with most YouTube things anyways, is that they don't ever get updated on the help pages, and often things are around this. But your channel must have 20,000 subscribers to be a shopping affiliate, and I feel like they changed that. So it really isn't a thing that most content creators can do anyways. So I feel like we're probably in a little bit better situation than I thought, because it definitely felt like YouTube was about to just be flooded with a lot of shopping links. It probably still is going to be somewhat flooded with shopping links, but not as badly as I thought. Also, they've certainly dropped the ball. If they were trying to launch this in a big way before Prime Day, I'm definitely not seeing it. Although, in all fairness, maybe I'm not seeing it because I have ad blockers on. That is a possibility too. There's Blizzard president here saying that Diablo 4 being released on Xbox Game Pass isn't happening. The game was advertised from Microsoft's subscription service on a Brazilian payments app, which you have a tweet here of just, this is not happening. There is increasing amount of people saying Twitter is dying and Thread is thriving. But yeah, we shall see how that goes. It wouldn't be the worst case scenario if Twitter failed just enough that somebody else came in and took over. Like the previous people before Elon Musk were in charge were doing a bad job with Twitter. Elon Musk obviously is doing a bad job with Twitter, as far as just keeping it running and keeping people happy on the service. So if there was a third person to come in and buy the company for cheap, I could see a Twitter version 3.0 maybe bringing back a lot of people. Otherwise, I still feel like there is a case where you need something other than a Facebook replacement. I believe Blizzard's president also said if you aren't finding enough to do with Diablo 4, go play a different game, which I guess is a way to respond. It seems like a weird way to respond, but whatever. To tell people to go play a different game. I don't feel like we've quite gotten to the point where most people are complaining that there isn't enough content on Diablo 4, but I would say the fact that your character resets after each season does really highlight that there probably isn't that much content in the game in the long run, if compared to playing as the same character through 2 whole campaigns with a lot of DLC in Diablo 2. Naughty Dog's co-president Evan Wells is going to retire from the studio at the end of 2023. Neil Druckmann has provided an update on the studio's new leadership. Does that mean Neil Druckmann is going to be the new leader. He'll be the co-head of the studio with Wells until his departures, which co-heads of studios were always going to be a problem, and as well as head of creative director. And then Alison Mori will become the studio manager and head of operations. Arnie Meyer will become the head of culture and communications. Christian Gerling will become head of technology. Eric Pangolian and Jeremy Yells will become co-heads of the art departments. And Anthony Newman will move into a new role as the head of production and design. So it definitely seems like Neil Druckmann is coming into power and potentially bringing in a whole bunch of new people who are on his side, which, as a gamer, I really just want to see what Naughty Dog is doing for their next game, and don't really care about the political intrigue of who's running the company. It does seem like this is a fairly cordial retirement slash splitting up as far as Evan Wells. I don't feel like co-presidents were ever a smart idea in the first place. Maybe it makes sense in the short run, though, to have two co-presidents just to see who actually works in that position, but that seems like a crazy way to do business, really. Instead of just figuring out who would work or picking somebody, it kind of doesn't matter who's president as long as one person's president in a company. And then here's GameDeveloper.com talking about the Microsoft not getting the FTC's preliminary injunction being denied, which is being written completely inaccurately to say Microsoft has won the trial whatsoever. The trial certainly can continue and will continue. And arguably, maybe trial is even the wrong word, and it should have been described as a hearing. It's a major problem in the United States, and I imagine other countries, in that the court systems and the political systems are so complicated and so poorly described and explained, and people are not educated around that at all. But yeah, that definitely seems like reporters have a duty to be more accurate and not just say Microsoft has won a trial just because a preliminary injunction. Preliminary is in the name. Like, all the evidence can still be presented, the case can still happen as far as the core complaints and the core begging for relief, or prayers for relief, I think is what they're called, to undo the merger or stop the merger at a later time. All the preliminary injunction said is that the process will not stop. Because it's denied, the process will not be completely stopped right now and can proceed. Let's see, what's this? Again, Distillery revealing their SDC San Diego Comic Con. Let's see. Scott Snyder and Jock Spotlight. Drinking from the Devil's Cut. The Devil's Cut is your introduction to Distillery, a newly published, refined, creator-owned comics. In the aging process, the whiskey that evaporates is called the Angel's Share, but the most potent spirits are captured in the wood, the devil's cut. Available at the convention in 2 convention exclusive covers, the devil's cut overflows with unfiltered stories from the most fearless creators, offering a distinct taste. So it is just a bunch of pilot comics. And if anything, they've gone crazy with the artwork and the different D logos. Like, there was a whole, I think, animated GIF around it where this D logo was being shown in multiple different ways, perhaps giving a hint as to what they're shooting for here. This one being a space focused one logo. And then I wanted to mention here cosplay done wrong, in my opinion, in that you have a Freddy Krueger crossplay here, in that a lady is dressing up as the male Freddy Krueger. The obviously going for lewd things here, but really just an off-the-shelf hat, an off-the-shelf toy. Maybe they struggled a little bit to find a striped shirt here, but that's pretty much off the shelf too. Off the shelf cut up shorts. Over here you have even worse, in that it is a Nightmare on Elm Street t-shirt that's been either stitched up to be shorter than I imagine it was originally, or cut off, and then little blood stains being added. But the makeup and the face is completely wrong for Freddy Krueger because he was burned in a fire, so his face should be, and her face should be, somewhat burned. And I could certainly see an argument that maybe you don't want to make yourself look hideously burned, but maybe you add a scar here. He was completely bald, but honestly, I don't think even in the flashbacks Freddy Krueger had blonde hair. No, he had like either black or brown curly hair on top. So the hair is completely wrong. Freddy Krueger, not really notoriously known for showing his arms or legs. But the biggest thing here is definitely a mistake in theme. And that Freddy Krueger is supposed to be scary, not lewd or sexy. And Freddy Krueger definitely didn't have a butt that was being highlighted, or hips that were being highlighted. And to top off that, Freddy Krueger is notoriously, in his writing, written as a misogynist, woman hater. So that theme is being lost. And he is also notoriously hinted at in the original Freddy Krueger series and directly called a pedophile in the remake. And that the reason why the people of Elm Street formed an angry mob and killed Freddy Krueger and burnt him in a furnace is because he was hurting, is what they said, I believe, in the first series, and then in the reboot series, straight up molesting children. The original children on Elm Street, of which most of which you don't follow in the original series. It's the but yeah, he's also a murderer. So you're just completely off on theme here. And the big red lipstick is wrong too. Now, I have seen a Freddy Krueger image that is basically a topless lady with much better knife gloves, like coming across her boob in her hand. And at that point, that's not really cosplay as much as it is just a fetish image. But even in that case, it is shot with a much better camera angle and eye to it, so it feels a little spooky even seeing a nude image there. Let me see if I can find the other thing, because there's a statue that does it a lot better. The other thing I would say here is when you look at how blown out the camera is here, this is almost certainly another case where you probably would have done better shooting day for night in just a brightly lit scene, and then or even on a green screen, and then adding the night element later, because this looks like it's catching a lot of dust and a lot of fog on the background here, which doesn't improve the visuals. Let me see if I can and yeah, it does also point out that there definitely are some lewd cosplayers out there that will do basically any character if you can get away with it. Let's see. So yeah, if we just look here on image searches by default, you do see a better concept there, turning the iconic sweater into a dress with a slash in it, or just in general sweater. But this is not the figurine I was looking for. I typed in figure and I needed to type in figurine. And Freddy Krueger is not a, let's see, anime girl figure. That's probably it. Well, interestingly, not coming up either. I swear I've seen this figurine. Freddy Krueger, I guess, is in enough video games to be considered a character. I think what I'm gonna have to do is turn off safe search. Safe search off. Well, here's a figurine, but it's another blonde character. So maybe that's what she was going for here. And certainly you can tell these are like Asian figurines. It's not the one I'm thinking of. Maybe I'm confusing a figurine I've seen of Jason Voorhees. Like, here's a Jason Voorhees figurine, anime girl. And certainly when you're getting to this idea of Bishoujo is the word they're using. Let's just have the general outfit but turn them into an anime girl as a concept. You're getting very far away from actually doing any kind of admiration for the characters and just making a whole new character in general. Friday the 13th probably could do well. I don't think I'm gonna find this. Maybe I dreamed it all up. It probably would do well, though. I might be thinking of Edward Scissorhands character. If it did introduce a new character, and it could be a female character. Instead, and did the same kind of idea of that Freddy Krueger in particular runs into that problem where he haunts people in their sleep and kills them. But that's the main concept. You reboot from that, you polish the edges of what Freddy Krueger used to be, and you create a new character, and it's Nightmare on Elm Street, second generation type character. You don't call him Freddy Krueger, you don't call him Fredwina Krueger and do a female version. You just create a new character that is killing people on Elm Street and doing a similar thing, but has some different style, and particularly you need a different actor at this point. Here's Edward Scissorhands. So yeah, there's been obviously a collection of figurines for horror characters, and I don't know if that is done because people are weird so much, or if that's done because people are trying to make something not scary that what is scary, or something like that. I don't know what the real thought there is. Regardless, we're supposed to be talking about video games, and I got rambling into that, which, if anything, that's just more evidence that the cosplay idea, even if we are specifically strictly focusing on video games, just becomes another speed bump, and I need to do something different with it. Like cosplay on Fridays at the end of the streams and have a rolling release, which that is kind of also what I'm doing with the old Yu-Gi-Oh! And video game news videos. I've published all of those. You probably only got notifications for the first 4 or so, but I was going well into like 2025, as far as just having things scheduled with 2 episodes every weekend, and that's not working. I don't think it works well with the algorithm. I don't think it works well with anything. So going forward, there will just be dumps of multiple episodes that will be non-published coming out. Not dumps all on the same day like I did manually, but what I'll do is I'll have it scheduled for, say, the next day, and then, or the next Monday. We could probably always start on a Monday, and then there may be a week or 2 of videos that stream, and then there'll be gaps in which nothing comes out, and then there'll be a week or 2 later whenever I schedule things. I'm not going to put a lot of effort into it, but it will hopefully have the recorded versions of live streams come out a lot quicker and get away from the idea of them being reruns that people might actually want to watch. YouTube apparently is experimenting with the idea of curating a actual TV channel type lineup, broadcast type content. I doubt I'll be allowed into that. YouTube has also announced that they're going to give suggestions on titles, so fingers crossed I potentially would get a lot better hints as to what my video title should be. These are going to be done by the transcripts, so for in my case, it probably won't be that good, because the transcripts probably don't understand what I'm saying very well. Anyways, that is something that I try not to complain about too much, but I do really wonder if a lot of people just have trouble understanding what I'm saying, or that I'm not speaking and enunciating correctly enough. But I think that's probably a fear that most people have, unless you are just a very, very well-renowned public speaker. and maybe that never goes away. The summer sale is still going on until tomorrow. Let's go through the Video Games Chronicle articles. Let's see. Xbox consoles can once again run emulators in retail mode. Microsoft closed a loophole earlier in which allowed retail access to emulation apps. Although, weirdly, I heard of a system where people were paying a smaller fee to some third-party company to get a license on their console to run emulators, in part because you might not be able to send the money directly to Microsoft. Yeah, the real truth here is, though, if you're going to emulate, either get a Steam Deck or get an older console that's been completely cracked. I don't think that there's that good of an argument to try and do emulation on the most recent consoles that they're still caring about and still patching. But certainly, Microsoft could just straight up say, hey, you know what, we'll just allow the Dolphin emulator so you can play Nintendo games. We'll allow RetroArch so you can play older Nintendo games and older games in general. Because it's not like Microsoft is going to lose any money if you're playing old Wii games on the Dolphin emulator or old NES games. And in particular, Nintendo has never, even for a second, given any indication that they would allow Super Mario Bros. 1, for instance, to be emulated and run in an official manner on an Xbox console. So, yeah. They might as well turn the knife. I guess Microsoft is just being very future looking. Just think, well, maybe at some point Nintendo might say, let's put our games on, let's put the Nintendo eShop on an Xbox console. Which I bet Xbox would be willing to do that. If I was Phil Spencer, or somebody at Xbox, I would say, yeah, we'll take the Nintendo console eShop. We'll let you take all the sales you want, too. Like, we'll have a maybe 5% extra fee, so it's maybe a little bit more expensive. Just to maintain things, but that's about it. If we were given, if the Nintendo eShop was just on the Xbox, that would work for a lot of people. But yeah, if you want to emulate, get a Steam Deck. It's a much better system, or use an old console. I'm sure you won't have anywhere as much trouble emulating on an Xbox One versus an Xbox Series X. A new Yokai Watch game is further teased for the 10th anniversary. Yokai Watch never really making it very popular outside of Japan, although it's incredibly popular inside of Japan as kind of a Pokemon competitor. Former Curse to Golf and Q Game developers have announced a new studio. The studio's first game is going to be inspired by the Japanese countryside and rural culture, which really doesn't mean much of anything. I've decided that I have to give up the attempt of using my air conditioner to dehumidify because it was really just getting crazy as far as how cold it was getting. Right now it is particularly cold. Let me see what mode we're in. And so, yeah, I've just changed the humidity warning on my thermostat to now only warn me when it's up to 75%, where it was warning me at 70%. Clearly, I need just a dehumidifier. Homelander has seemingly been confirmed for Mortal Kombat 1. The character will also join Call of Duty later this week, so that lots of people using Homelander as a character. Although, ironically, they're all using the depiction of Homelander as he's depicted in the Amazon Prime video series. There has been basically no extra interest in the Boys comic book. So, and that seems like that is just continuously the problem, is that somebody makes a comic book that should be a lot more popular and people won't read the comic book, and then somebody will make a TV show based on the comic book, and then all of a sudden it gains ownership in the mind space of people as being the original creator. When people think of Iron Man, they think of Robert Downey Jr. They don't think of an Iron Man depicted in any comic book. We already talked about Xbox Game Pass not happening, Diablo 4. Probably will eventually happen, though. I can't imagine that Activision Blizzard gets acquired and none of their games eventually get converted to Xbox Game Pass. Almost certainly it will happen. They may go slow, though. They may just re-release like Diablo 1 and on Game Pass, and then they may a year later re-release Diablo 2, and then a year later re-release Diablo 3, and then a year later release Diablo 4, and by that point we'd be closer to a Diablo 5, and it wouldn't matter. Let's see. Video Games Chronicle making the same bad headline, saying that it's won its U.S. court case. And then they're potentially going even further, saying the judge refuses to grant the Federal Trade Commission an injunction blocking the deal. That's not likely that he's outright refused it. I think it would be much more accurate to say he declined to grant the Federal Trade Commission's preliminary injunction. Not that they couldn't file another preliminary injunction potentially, and he might accept that. Which, yeah, saying refuses is to imply the judge just said, nope, no, under no circumstances would I say yes to that. And that would not be very judge-like. That being said, what you think a judge is and what a judge actually is often can be very different as far as how fair and impartial they may actually be. Let's see. We also have the story here where the UK regulator and Microsoft paused litigation in a bid to reach an agreement. The CMA says it will consider new proposals after Microsoft wins the US court case clearing the deal. Splash Damage is offering Battalion 1944 Kickstarter refunds after falling short of promises, quote, falling short of promises. The game never made it to console as planned. Interesting. PlayStation 5 owners can also claim a 6-month Apple TV Plus free trial, and more limited 3-month offers are also available on PS4. As another thing that I've seen Slick Deals talking about is that Amazon Prime Video is offering a few 3-month for $1 type subscription services for other channels. HBO Max was about the only one that maybe I would have considered, but I've also seen, not particularly around Amazon Prime, but just out there, some PlayStation 5s that are particularly on decent deals there was like a Dell Duel where you would get a $100 rebate if you bought PlayStation 5 and Call of Duty. So yeah, not a terrible deal if you were looking for a PlayStation 5. Assassin's Creed Codename Red could be targeting a 2024 release. Ubisoft has been looking for commercial partners for the Japan set game. I think there is a very high chance, though, that the Japanese set Assassin's Creed game will just turn into another Beyond Good and Evil and never actually gets released. Because there's been a desire to have a Japanese set Assassin's Creed for a very long time, and they have had either a desire not to do it internally or no idea of how you really do it internally. I don't know what the real problem there is, other than assassinations aren't super common. Like if you play a Japanese set Assassin's Creed game and you end up assassinating the Emperor, you could probably do that once, but you couldn't do it multiple times. And even assassinating higher ranking officials kind of doesn't make sense. It feels more accurate that you would have the Emperor sending out assassins to assassinate low-level village chiefs and punching down effectively. Yeah. There really isn't that same spirit of fairness or individuality around it, around how Japanese politics would have happened in the past. So the idea of a bad emperor or bad feudal lord in Japan is pretty much standard, and the idea of an assassin or a individual Japanese person standing up and acting different is not very Japanese at all. We're making great changes. That's why, particularly in the Asian countries, when you think about it, like Nobunaga's ambition and Nobunaga as a character is shown as this like general character that makes great change. There isn't a revolutionary type characters that came from smaller lower castes, whereas in the United States we try to make George Washington and Abraham Lincoln out like they are small, scrappy, individualistic people that come from the common man's lot, when in reality they were all slave owners and very rich people in general, distillers, bootleggers, things like that. They were incredibly rich people that had a lot of power and influence. Moving on, we already talked about Naughty Dog's co-president retiring after 25 years. 25 years is not that long, but if this is a recent picture of these guys, they both look fairly young still, although there is a real problem here. Also, when you have a picture, Evan Wells, is this Evan or is this Evan? I kind of think this is Evan, but they really should do a better job of cropping out a person, or at the very least put a description. Evan Wells pictured on the left here, or pictured on the right, left, right. Yeah, it almost make me wonder if Evan Wells is just a conjoined twin, and that this is one person, two heads. If you're going to show me a picture like that, and yeah, that's not realistic. Let's see. The FTC is reportedly leaning towards appealing its Microsoft Activision loss. The judge ruled that the FTC failed to prove that the merger could harm competition. Which, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they are going to at least threaten to appeal the preliminary injunction. But if they appeal the preliminary injunction, then that stops the proceedings. I believe this is true, going any further. So it's very possible that you have two paths, and one path would be let the preliminary injunction fail and continue stating your case in the current case, or pause the current case and appeal the preliminary injunction for at least a couple days. And who knows whether the FTC, what their plan is or what they will do. Meanwhile, they are spending taxpayers' money causing this whole court case to happen. So if they are knowingly saying that, if they know for a fact this will not work and they're just wasting the taxpayers' money, that's not right. On the other hand, if they think it might work and they honestly do believe this would be better for the people of the United States, then they should go with it. And it very possibly would be better for the people of the United States if the Microsoft Activision merger wasn't allowed. It'd probably be better for the people of the United States if a lot of mergers were not allowed or undone, and we just had medium-sized businesses and small businesses instead of ever increasing mega corporations that are going to gain more influence and power than any political party could ever hope to have. Moving on, the Pokemon Center launches new Pokemon Go apparel collection, which, okay, seems kind of ridiculous. The Last of Us showrunner Craig Mazin has reportedly removed himself from the Borderlands movie credits. Interesting. The film was due out to be released in 2022. So why would you remove yourself from the credits of the Borderlands film? Is it that bad? He's reportedly removed his name from the writing credits of the film, instead being credited under a pseudonym of Joe Crombie. Is that the new pseudonym that they're using? It used to be Alan Smithy was the name people had reported. It was reported in January that reshoots for the long in development adaptation had been taken over by the Deadpool director Tim Miller. Yeah, this is the last time we saw anything, was just these characters in silhouette. So yeah, does seem like the Borderlands movie is probably not going to be that good, which really isn't that surprising. I don't know how you would make a live action Borderlands movie and make it particularly any good anyways. It does seem like an insane idea. It would have made a lot more sense if you just told me you were going to make an animated movie, and then if somehow the animated movie really worked, you might make a live action movie later. But yeah, I don't even know what you can do to make the wild fashion and hair design work in a Borderlands movie, even if you're not doing the crazy visual comic book filter to it. And it's not like there's that good of a story around Borderlands in the first place. It's a flimsy story for each game, just giving you an excuse to run around and shoot a bunch of things. So one would assume that the Borderlands movie should be a almost Mission Impossible style run around shooting things, or hardcore Henry or Fast and the Furious style movies where it's just a lot of running and gunning. I think there's some problems even in live action though, as far as doing running and gunning and getting rated, because in a game like Borderlands, in a movie like Borderlands, you would assume you would want to see people getting hit by bullets, and potentially either bleeding or dying. And increasingly in movies, you've had a case where people get hit by bullets and then they fall down below the screen so you can't see them and you never see any blood, or you just see bullets flying and they never hit anybody at all. And that's being done more and more because the ratings board, the MPAA, has increasingly gotten strict about showing gunshot wounds and people actually getting hit. And they've been very lenient on the idea that you can have 1,000 people on screen shooting guns, but the second you see an impact from a bullet hit somebody and they fall down versus them just falling down and it seeming like they were hit by a bullet, that changes the ratings, let alone squibs, which you basically don't ever see squibs or blood bursts or anything happen like that. Almost certainly Borderlands is going to have to be an NC-17 movie to be accurate to the video game at all, which would be a problem if it was NC-17. You can't go more kid friendly on Borderlands. You really shouldn't even begin to try that. I want to blame Randy Pitchford perhaps for some of the failure of the Borderlands movie, since he is super focused on it, but I honestly wouldn't be surprised if this is more just standard movie making problems in general. Let's see. Here was that same story. Microsoft could face a new merger investigation in the UK. One would assume UK law does not allow for like double jeopardy, in that a new investigation can just be made over and over and over again. But I wouldn't be surprised if that's almost exactly what can happen. Is that they can just constantly form new investigations over and over again if they want to. Let's see. We already probably talked about these stories, but we'll go through them quickly. The EA Sports Football Club 24 gets its first trailer ahead of a full reveal later this week. Twisted Metal is getting an explicit new trailer ahead of this month's release. I wasn't gonna watch this last time, but let's just see what this trailer looks like in a blurred mode. Okay, I immediately see a couple of kids, and yeah, there's a quick flash of a couple kids playing a video game. We're playing with RC cars. Then it's now focusing on something completely different. I'm seeing them drive around in cars and shooting. It seems like he's talking to the screen like Zombieland. Yeah, it seems like there might be a safer region. In a lot of ways, I wouldn't be surprised if Twisted Metal is really just yet another Death Race movie, taking the ideas of Death Race and starting again. I'm seeing a lot more of the idea of driving from point A to point B instead of just driving around in arenas shooting people. I feel like most of the explicitness here is probably in what's being said, and since I'm not hearing that, the clown guy just splattered somebody bloodily on the wall. They're showing more characters in this trailer. I really don't feel like there's a lot of story around Twisted Metal in the first place, so I'm not really expecting too much there. there was a TV series on Sci-Fi called Blood Drive, and it was probably impossible to ever watch that again. It was way more explicit than that trailer was, and what I suspect Twisted Metal will be. But yeah, in comparison, while I saw some guns shooting some guns being shot and guns being pointed, I did not see anybody getting hit by a bullet or getting even knocked down to the ground. There was one bloody section in which a clown smashed and splattered some blood against the wall, hitting somebody. So there was some blood there, but yeah. I feel like this Peacock original is still probably trying to be TV appropriate, even though it's on a streaming service. And that's another thing that has been a major problem. You would think that with the likes of Amazon Prime and Netflix, that would be a point where you would have said, hey, we're not beholden to any rules or regulations. We're going to have softcore porn and nudity and cussing, and we're going to let the audience do whatever they want. But it's just not the case on either one of those streaming services. You can maybe find some old movies with a little bit of nudity on Amazon Prime. There's almost nothing with any nudity on Netflix at all. You might have a better chance on Hulu with an old movie. Of course, the problem with Hulu is that it's always on the verge of being completely changed as one investor pulls out, and then the next investor pulls out, and somebody else takes over complete control of it, and eventually Hulu will just be a part of Disney Plus or owned by Disney wholly, and I imagine any adult content on Hulu at that point would go away. Yep, here we have Modern Warfare 2 and Warzone Season 4 adding the boys operators. Then EA apparently is hiring for a third Star Wars Jedi game. The series director said he hopes to make a trilogy. Probably is a good move. I don't think the second Jedi game was as well received. Are they called Jedi Knight games? Jedi Knight and Jedi Survivor. Yeah, I could imagine there being enough sales though, by far, and enough reception. Plus, I don't think EA has that much else going for it other than their sports games, so if they are going to continue down the path of trying to be a developer of other games and court people other than just sports games players, they need to continue down the path of making original IP, which EA for a long time really wasn't doing that, so I'm glad that they've moved away from the idea of only making sports games. I've probably seen a fairly sharp decline and don't want to admit it around sports games too, as there's been enough controversy and just declining interest, I think, in a lot of sports. American football, I don't know if there's that much controversy around football around the world. Soccer, baseball is definitely declining quite a bit, and I don't think, maybe EA was making the wrestling games before, but I think they lost that license. ID at Xbox Demo Fest will return today and run to June 11th, today being yesterday actually, which there's a whole list here on Video Games Chronicles of demos. I don't feel like I know very many of these, but some of these definitely are older games, like Punch Club 2 Fast Forward, unless that's a new version of Punch Club 2. Slave Zero X sounds like a porn game. Seems weird though for them to put out demos not during the whole Game Fest thing. Yes, Valve was also putting out demos on Steam, but it would have made a lot of sense just for them to put out demos at that point. Also, potentially getting people hyped around demos for old games or new games that people aren't around, that are going to be single A and double A games, and then only talking about triple A games after the fact during the Summer Games Fest makes probably a little bit more sense than getting people hyped on triple A games that have been announced at the Summer Game Fest and then several weeks later trying to get people hyped on indie demos or double A single A games. Moving on to Gematsu. Dragon Quest Monsters has more information for Dragon Quest Monsters The Dark Prince. Exoprimal has a detailed post-launch roadmap with new game mode, Monster Hunter collaboration, exosuit variants, and more. The Ninja Saviors Return of the Warriors is coming to PC on July 24th. It's currently available for PS4 and Switch. Interesting. See what that looks like on the Steam page. Looks like a beat 'em up game that might be of some interest. Persona 5 Tacticia details the characters, several characters in the battle system, if you want to check that out. I think in general, I'm not particularly interested in this game. I think the art style shift is probably a big problem there, and the fact I think that it's just a different style of gameplay mechanic might be a little bit of a problem, although it may not be that big of a problem. I want to see if I can get down here if Sega is involved, but apparently not. Apparently Atlas owns the Persona series. Weirdly. Well, that is an interesting question, then. How can Sega own the Megami Tensei series, but Atlas be the people in control of the Persona series? That's something I'd have to research, certainly. But Atlas may also be a fully owned subsidiary of Sega. Let's check that. They own the Shin Megami Tensei series. They made Persona 3. Official website, English. Doing more research than probably should. It's way down here. Copyright Atlas, copyright Sega, all rights reserved. Let's see. Company. Well, they seem to be either being sneaky about it or just not really wanting to point it out. But yeah, Sega owns Atlas. Obviously, when I scroll back up here, when you have Sega there. Okay, that answers my question. That was more work than it was worth. A Yokai Watch 10th anniversary website has been launched. I guess if you want to check that out. We Spike Survivors? I don't know how you pronounce that. Sword of the Necrodancer launches July 20th for the PS4 and 5, Switch and PC, and then August 3rd for the Xbox Series and Xbox One. Another Survivor game. I'll give it a chance. I'm probably being more generous to games that bother to get news press, put out a press release on Gamatsu, than something that just shows up on Steam. Former Q Games developers established a Kyoto-based game studio called Dinky Works, or Dinkai Works. Yeah. This definitely seems like two foreigners and one Asian guy. It's kind of interesting to be based out of Kyoto too. I saw a YouTube video looking at one of the major problems with buying old Japanese buildings and houses, and that they are just falling apart, and there's local code that really won't let you replace them or tear them down and rebuild, and there's extremely expensive, which, yeah, it's no surprise everybody mostly is in Japan, and in Tokyo, and Tokyo's I think is more lenient and just has newer buildings. Moving on, Rhapsody Mail Kingdom Chronicles has a trailer if you want to check this out. Although, this looks like this is just an JRPG game. I don't know if I would call it an RPG Maker game though. Looks like it may just be an older game in general. Moving on. A game called Revita has physical editions for the PS4 and 5 and Switch, launching in Q4 of 2023. The FTC injunction request. Yeah, I feel like Gamatsu doing a much better job on the headline. Gamatsu seems to be much better at doing headlines without putting in some kind of bias or just ineptitude. And judge denies the FTC injunction request in the Microsoft's proposed acquisition of Activision Blizzard. The deal can now move forward in the United States ahead of the July 18th deadline. That feels like that is a much flatter tone. Neon White physical editions for the PS5 and Switch launches September 15th. Action RPG Monolith Requiem of the Ancients has been announced for all consoles and PC. Let's see what that looks like. Well, looks like nothing. Still running into major problems with the internet just not being fast enough. Yeah, looks interesting enough to give a follow to. Like when I click on a link, I really would like it to be instantaneous, and it doesn't seem like you're ever really guaranteed that. Let's see. Hellboy Web of Weird gameplay trailer is available if you want to check that out. Did I ever put this on the follow list? No. Everspace 2 for PS5 and Xbox Series launches August 15th. It's been in early access, and it made it to my wishlist even as a space fly around game. That's quite surprising. A cyberpunk visual novel called Solar State launches this summer for Xbox One and Series and PC. Yep. Different art style. Kind of has that soft watercolor style art to it. Let's see. Myth Force launches September 12th, currently early access on PC. See what that looks like on Steam. Might be something. Yeah, we've looked at this recently. Roman Sands Rebuild launches this summer for PC, this winter for Xbox One and Series and Switch. I don't think we've seen this one. It does seem like we are finally starting to get more announcements. At least Gamatsu is giving us more announcements. Axiom Verge 2 is now available for Xbox One as a bundle. It's been out for a long time on Steam. I didn't really like Axiom Verge 1 though, so as a Metroidvania. And recently it seems like it's not getting a ton of positive reviews. So my personal decision was to not make any more footage and play the game. I'm always looking for Metroidvania games and always finding very few of them to my liking. A game called Stray Souls adds Akira Yamaoka as composer. New trailer features a new track called Splintered Minds. I don't even remember this game though. Is this some kind of horror game? Apparently so. I wouldn't be surprised if I looked at this game and then just immediately dismissed it, or honestly have just never seen it. I still am missing a lot of games, more games than I should be, considering I'm looking at basically everything. Stumble Guys is coming to consoles, starting with the Xbox Series and Xbox One. Let's see if we can get a review on Stumble Guys here. I mean, this is overwhelmingly positive. Let's make a YouTube short around that and see if that works. I feel like there's something I'm gonna have to do with the YouTube shorts to upload them by date or something, instead of uploading them by name. Otherwise you're just gonna have big bundles of things that start with the letter A, and just it's gonna be alphabetical in clumps, and that wouldn't make the most sense. Digital Eclipse announces the making of Karateka for all consoles and PC. First entry is a goal in the Gold Master series. They made a remake of Karateka a few years ago, maybe 6 or 7, and this is not Karateka. This is I thought it was a decent remake, but it also felt like a making of the original game, or a way to play the original game would probably be a little bit more justified. In Karateka, in the remake, you play as multiple characters, and Every time you die, you play as a slightly stronger character, but you get a worse ending in the original game. You may just get different endings based on how much damage you do. It'd be interesting. But there is also definitely a case here where they're trying to make Karateka seem like it is more of a game that had more influence than it really did. I mean, it is before Prince of Persia, but then this company, Digital Eclipse, has no rights to Prince of Persia. Seemingly so. But yeah, historically, it might be somewhat important, but it really struggles to have relevance. And maybe it's one of these games that was more of a Commodore 64 game, one of those first generation games, whereas second generation gamers, people who played on the NES, would have never given it the time of day. Inherently, I think part of the problem is they just didn't make enough sequels and continuations were on Karateka, and the fact that it took like 25 years or so, 30, 40 years potentially, apparently it's an Atari game, to make a sequel or a remake was its main problem. Whereas had you tried to evolve Karateka as a concept and made sequels and just continued to shovel out more games, it would have more relevancy. In the same way, I would say Myst is kind of like that. If you just made Myst 1 and then never remade Myst and never made any sequels to it, it may be like historically important, but it really wouldn't have felt like a series that is still playable today. And Karateka is definitely not very playable today. It also runs into the problem of the kind of white savior versus Asian people trope that would have been really the only way you could have even made or sold a game like this, and that you have this black belt karate white guy with blonde hair saving a blonde haired lady who's been kidnapped by Asian bad guys, and then you fight Asian bad guys the whole time. Let's see, we already talked about the Naughty Dog co-president going to retire. We have another Persona 5 Tacticia trailer on Gametsu if you want to check that out. NIS, Nippon Ichi Software, has a 30th anniversary website that's launched, which almost certainly is all just going to be around like their one major game series. That's pretty much all they have to talk about. Seems like there's 4 potential announcements here. But Disgaea, is that the name of the series? I think. These are pretty much all Disgaea series characters from what I can tell. Moving on, a game called Rear Sekai launches October 12th in Japan. New details from a weekly Famitsu. Is there a weekly Famitsu on top of a monthly Famitsu? Maybe. This is some kind of Switch RPG, action RPG. The game called Reveria, The Promised Land Remastered has been announced. Famitsu review scores for issue 1806. Yeah, I've always seen Famitsu as being I guess it has always been a weekly, because we get a new issue every week, don't we? Evil West getting 31 out of 40. Nobunaga's Ambition Awakening getting 36 out of 40. Again, very, very popular character. And obviously a popular game, whereas Summer Party Time for the Switch was given 28 out of 40, so particularly unpopular game there. When you look at Nobunaga's Ambition screenshot here, It feels to me like it is very much a strategy resource game, and almost feels like it has multiple currencies like a mobile game, but I suspect it actually doesn't. It is just different resources you're balancing. Swan Yu Sword Mists Beyond the Mountains launches July 26th for PC and then later in 2023 for the Switch. Let's see what that looks like. Yeah, I guess one way to kind of claw back my skepticism around RPG maker looking games or JRPG games in general is to say, if something does have a actual Kometsu article and put out a press release, then that does seem like it probably does deserve to be talked about a little bit more compared to a game that doesn't bother to put out a press release and just releases the game directly to Steam with no publishing or announcements. A rhythm action game called Super Crazy Rhythm Castle has been announced for all consoles and PC. Let's see, do we have a link to Steam yet? Party games specifically focused around rhythm with multiple players. It's an interesting thought. I don't know if that really is going to work. I think particularly if you're talking about rhythm games, you probably want to take turns or just have one player. You probably don't want an entire rock band type game where you have 5 different people trying to be on rhythm and on the note and on the beat. At a certain point, that feels almost like you're just turning band practice into a video game when you would be better just having a garage band and practicing amongst that garage band in the first place. Moving on, Behavior Interactive opens a new studio in the UK composed of former Antimatter game developers. Behavior UK South opens following the February acquisition by Sock Monkey. Okay. I don't know if we have anything else to really say there. And then that's going to bring us to the GameDeveloper.com articles. Splash Damage transitions to a 4-day work weeks, which I think that works fine. The subheadline is 4 is slowly becoming the new 5. Although, in almost every story I've seen somebody transitioning to a 4-day work week, they are transitioning to 10 hours a day also of time. And in video game development too, that's probably even more than 10 hours a day. This is for their London office. Honestly, in game development in particular, I feel like you could come in once a week on Friday and work from home the rest of the time as a salary employed at your own schedule. And I think that would work pretty much the same. Maybe be on call so people can email you or talk to you or phone call you during 9 to 5 or whatever, but otherwise just being allowed to work your own schedule. I was thinking about this, and I really wouldn't know, but I wonder what the value really would be to have a quarantine room in an office if somebody is starting to feel sick. Probably not much. I think if somebody's starting to feel sick, you probably should send them home regardless. And ideally you'd have your employees feel safe and secure in their job enough that they could go home or not show up because they're sick in the first place. It is insane, the system we have here, where if somebody's sick, they, under threat of being fired, have to come to work and infect everybody else, and create a public nuisance or actual threat to public health, because employees and employers, or employers and businesses and management, want to control people and have been given more authority than they really should be given, by far. And yeah, even if employees, employers, bosses, management are very forgiving and very kind around not coming to work around sick days and all of that, you still have a lot of employees who have grown up in a mentality where you never call in sick and you never skip a day for any reason. And that is highly propagated around the perfect attendance awards around schools and things like that, where honestly certain students should be potentially fined, or I don't know, like a monetary fine, but they should have an attendance score grade that's lowered if they show up 100% of the time. They should be told at the last day of school to not come in or something, and miss like a pizza party or something at the end of the school because they came in every day, whereas everybody who took at least one day off should be given a pizza party for having better mental health and better accuracy on their health in the first place, as far as all that goes. But that also would certainly punish parents that don't have childcare, which that's part of the problem too, is that kids that have perfect attendance a lot of times are at school because the parents couldn't take a day off work to take care of their kids, and it's all part of its own major problem. It's just a bad system overall that needs to be improved upon. Moving on, once again you have GameDeveloper.com on the FTC trial article. We talked about that. And then Bulkhead pledging to refund every Battalion 1944 Kickstarter backer. A modder group is restoring third-party emulation for the Xbox Series X and S. We talked about that. ESA, we talked about. Microsoft layoffs, we talked about. ESA again, we talked about. And then Naughty Dog presents, we talked about. So almost all of those stories we'd already covered. And we've got the auto blur working now on the fall list cleanup. So here we have something from 2020. Hit Zero Chronos. It is 30 reviews, but it's at about 75% and only at 32 reviews after several years of being out. So I'm going to say no to that. Then we have one from March. It looks like it's a black and white infinite runner. Didn't catch on enough though, so that's going to leave the fall list. Then we have Hip Witch, which is very positive, from February. So we can put that on the wish list. Okay. Every now and then we get something like this. And let's see. Weirdly, this game isn't in the adult section. It says it contains suggestive themes, sexual references, brief depictions, mild violence, crude humor, and partial nudity. If anything, I suspect, looking at it, this is one of those games that has a patch there somewhere. Seems like very likely you have more skin showing in a patched version of this character, decent amount of skin showing as far as this character, But I wouldn't be surprised if there's a patch that just makes the characters straight up topless. This seems fairly obvious as far as the big armor, that would go away. Alright, so you have a case here where it's Japanese full audio with 20 plus hours of gameplay as far as visual novel, and it seems like it's being well received. 95% positive, so whatever. I guess that has to go to the wish list. I can't bend over backwards to find an excuse to say no. Does that mean I will actually buy it as a visual novel? Probably not. I guess the thought certainly here is, does it have branching storylines? And this does seem like this is inspired by a different anime where the bad guy, the main protagonist, was betrayed or treated badly, and so now he's potentially just going to sleep with a lot of ladies to get revenge. Well, I guess we'll leave it at that and just put it on the wish list. And then this next game, things that start with H in Japanese are fairly common. It's from 2021 as a visual novel, and it doesn't have any reviews, so that can go away. And then this next one looks like it is just a standard puzzle game with some lewd anime girls. It's not really a standard puzzle game. It's one of these spin the hexagons around and match the different colors to make a pattern games. But no reviews on it, so it's from May. That goes away. His and Her collection from 2022. We can move that from the fall list. Hill Agency, Purity Decay, I will give more time to. Hike Island is just a walking simulator that is mixed reviewed, which isn't super surprising, so that'll go off the fall list. And then we have Hideout, Face Your Fears, which is mixed reviewed, so that's going away. And then we have Hidden World Top Down, which is mixed reviewed. Which honestly, the fall list is making a lot of these decisions a lot easier. Because if I had looked at this with no reviews, I would have been iffy about it. But seeing its mixed reviews, it's very easy to say no to that. Now let's look at all the new games on Steam. Let's see, we've got Paddle Flap, nothing there. Is Doomies an adult game? Protagonists may use revealing outfits. There's constant use of profanities and suggestive alcohol with some imagery players may consider disturbing. So yeah, this tongue out, bleeding eyes, black bar over eyes. Thumbnail seems to imply a certain attitude, but the actual visuals is very pixely. Ultra violent platform arcade shooting gun game. Yeah, I think I could easily say no to this. But you know what? It might play really well. So I'm gonna give it a follow. And do I want to make a YouTube short around it? I guess is the next question with all the blood splattering. I'm gonna say, in an abundance of caution, and because visually it doesn't look that interesting, no to a YouTube short. However, here we have Cave Dwellers is already mixed, so that's easy enough to say no to. Here we have a game called Puzzled Towers, which looks like nothing. Here we have a game called Sivo, which looks like an asset flip horror game, so no to that. Here we have Poly Royale, which looks like it's a Fortnite clone, so I'm going to just say no to that. Those kinds of games would have to get a lot of press coverage to grab my attention. Drink Stand Tycoon, looks like nothing. Gangster Coin Pusher. I mean, there might be something to the idea of a coin pushing game. Does it have in-app purchases? Yes, it does. Well, then I'm going to say no to that. Plus, also, it's Chinese, so obviously this is a low-effort gambling game with potentially real-world money going in, but probably never coming out. Here we have The Last Solver, which looks like it's an attempt at a puzzle game. I'm going to give this a chance by putting it on the fall list, but I'm not going to make a short around it. Here we have VR Immersion in the World of Russian Folk Art, which that feels like that is probably a Russian low effort game requiring VR, which in fact we've hit the point where VR games can be low effort. It's interesting. We have another hidden object game that I would have thought was from Big Fish Games, but is now coming from Do Games Limited, which I'm not really surprised that there wouldn't be multiple hidden object game people publishing them. They seem to sell particularly well still. I don't know why they sell that well. Here's yet another Backrooms game that looks exactly like many of the other Backrooms game, at least in part. Horror Engine. This game does not feel like it's horror inspired at all. Almost certainly this is just an asset flip game. Although there is something to be said around the idea of having different spooky looking walls and designs and textures. So often you see horror games set in the same dark cave like areas, whereas a shiny red plastic walled hotel might be fairly spooky, but this game itself is nothing. Next we have Quantum Rail. Give that a follow. We have Unbridled Horse Designer. I've got to give that a chance because I don't even know what you're looking for in a horse game, so this might very well be what you're looking for. Or this could just be an asset flip game where you're just making different looking horses and can't do anything with them. The main thing I guess would be, can you do more than just take a screenshot, or can you export this as a 3D model to some other game like Skyrim? I did hear some story, but I'm not sure I really get it, of people using AI voice samplings of actors to make adult mods on Nexus mods for like Skyrim, and the actors being unhappy about that. Maybe even one actor calling for people to like flag it and take it down. I question, maybe we won't see any adult games today. We only saw one on Monday. Legend of Santa. You know what? I'm gonna give that a chance. Looks like it's a Super Mario Bros. Clone, but doesn't look terrible. Just find it too. Hidden object game. Make a YouTube short around it. Multiplayer mercs. Doesn't look like anything. It was also interesting on how few games were on Monday or worth even talking about making a YouTube short on. And again, it seems like we are going to be in the same situation today where there's potentially just not that many adult games or games in general. We'll give Born to Rise a follow. It looks polished enough that it might actually be something. Here's our first adult game, Realm's Edge. It is a card-based game, but the cards, for the most part, weren't looking adult until I looked at the second screenshot. The video wasn't really highlighting this. Second screenshot has a lot of barbarian women, Viking women, topless on it. Okay, so it's basically a card-based game with a lot of topless ladies of varying hip ratios, but mostly hourglass figures and big hips and big breasts. A lot of cards, though, don't have ladies on them, and like Green Potion is one of the cards. I feel like the idea here is kind of dumb. It's $5.94 and it's online PvP only, and at the moment there's no Steam DB telling me how many people are online at the moment. So you may not be able to get that information because it's in the adult section. It does say there's a story mode to it, but I question how much there is. But yeah, overall I think the idea is a dumb idea. It'd be better to make a card game and then have a adult patch, or allow Nexus mods or some other mod makers to patch it. Like, there are several adult patches for Hearthstone. Hearthstone would not be a better game if it had started off as an adult card game, first and foremost. Particularly since you're online player versus player, so it makes a lot of sense to start off with a generally acceptable amongst public and people of multiple ages and multiple mindsets type game. And then if somebody personally wants to mod the way the cards look when they see it on their client, that should just be a mod. You shouldn't force those visuals onto every player, because then you lower the number of players who actually would want to play the game. So yeah, if that game was a bit more visually polished, I might have put it on the follow list and see if people like it, but as a card game it didn't look that good either. Monster Museum doesn't look polished enough for me. Frog Gin Up. I may be leaning too hard on the idea of using the phrase polished too, and I probably should use better descriptive terms. Star Shifter looks like it might be something. Impulse probably isn't anything. Then we have our next adult game, which is called Elseworld. I'm seeing 3D CGI characters of some weird anthropomorphic monster characters, basically. There's a smaller, like, fairy character. There's a big green goblin lady. There's a tan skin elf things. It seems like you can probably create your own fictional characters here. Small, like succubus girl. Seems like on these 3D characters, you can also give more freckles and like details on the skin, which is something that's noticeably missing in most 3D CGI asset flip type games, where it is just almost always a pure single color skin tone with no freckles or anything like that. That being said, this comes off like a weird 90s Russian cartoon with adult content in it than it does something that is fully thought out as an idea. They're saying you can play stripped chess, which chess is far too long of a game to play a stripped version of it to make any sense. If anything, either this is a game where somebody already had these assets, or somebody has a very particular fetish. Nipple piercings showing up on one of the characters, which you don't see that very often either. The game Elseworld is $4.99 and it's English only. Yeah, if anything, looking at the mature content description, which goes on for a while, it seems like somebody just had a story they wanted to tell and a fetish they wanted to fulfill, more than this being a product that's actually trying to sell to anybody other than these small 1 or 2 people who are interested in this fetish. There's a real problem here. Even if you were into Goblin Girls, you don't see more than one Goblin Girls. If you were into like fairy monster girls, they're all very varied in their appearance. So yeah, I do like the idea of more jewelry and more patterns on the skin, tattoos, things like that. Just more variety, but the actual gameplay parts look like garbage. So yeah, that's 2 adult games today. Love finding cats and pups. We can say no to this, I imagine. Although I don't really have a great explanation as to why I'm saying no to this hidden object game, and I've made YouTube shorts around 2 other hidden object games. Is this an adult game? Continent of the Nth Golden. Seems like it might have been, but I guess it isn't. That being said, it looks like one of these Chinese MMO games. It's all around the character design. And yeah, it is an MMO. Which I don't know if MMOs and having a custom character means much to people these days, or if it ever even really meant much. Alien Cube. Find your way out of the hypercube. This is another attempt on that hypercube movie spinoff. I'm going to give this a follow, but it's not visually polished enough. It's not good looking enough to get a short. We have a game called Impeach 2, which looks like it's a text political troll game. And I'll just leave it at that. Wormicide. I feel like one president was impeached twice, but I don't know which one it would have been. And I don't think anything has ever come from impeaching any president whatsoever in the United States. High-Rise Guardian. Let's see. Arena first-person shooter. Yeah, I don't think that's polished enough. There was an anime where There's a bunch of high-rise people shooting each other. It feels like that was somewhat inspired. And that was a Netflix original anime, I think. Well, here's an interesting thought. Are you allowed to use Wheatley or one of the memory cores from Portal 2 in the trailer of your game? Probably, because I think they have licensed or open sourced those models. Does it make it look like this game is good enough to really want to play? No, it doesn't. Interactive learning system that uses gamification on studying information technology fun and engaging. System has 3 modes. The quest concludes Duelist, I don't even know how you pronounce that, is actively expanding to provide fun learning in different topics. Yeah, this is just a bad looking game that's trying to sell itself as being educational. Gate 1 is a tower defense type game, or line defense type game, I guess is what you'd call it. Nothing there. Falling down. Yeah, that Skyrise Netflix anime where people were shooting guns at each other. I didn't pay attention to it and watch all of it, but I don't think it ended either, so it's just yet another anime that's never going to have a proper conclusion. It's going to be go read the manga and hope the manga ended. Souls Land 3 Spider Invasion doesn't look quite good enough. It looks like it's just an asset flip. And all of a sudden now I have a bunch of things that did not load, which means I probably need to slow down how tabs are loading. Or possibly even write in some checks to make sure images do properly load instead of having a bunch of broken links. Zodiac Hellish Memory doesn't look like anything. I'm gonna have to run to the bathroom if this goes on too long. Glass doesn't look like anything. Tides of Dominion doesn't look polished enough. Cards were dealt. Prologue. Doesn't look like anything. 2 more games. Yeah, still we really only saw 2 adult games today. And yeah, that feels like 1 or 2 too few. Particularly since we didn't see that many Monday either. EarthX. Rocket Management Company, probably a SpaceX clone troll game. You know what? I'll give that a chance. And then that's the end of the show. And so at this point, if I get my programming right, this would be also when the date would come back up. But we'll see how that works. That's going to be it for this stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want to support me further, there's some links down below in the description box. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.